Hello, I'm Janet Benton, Senior Vice President and Northern Nevada Small Business Manager for Nevada State Bank. In this video, we'll be discussing the Nevada State Bank 2016 Small Business Survey. We'll talk about some of the concerns of the business people we surveyed and what they predict for the coming year. We are excited to have one of Nevada's leading experts on economic data with us today to discuss the survey results. Jeremy Aguero is a principal analyst with Applied Analysis, who's often called on to provide economic data and also to help us understand what the numbers mean. His firm conducted the Small Business Survey. Jeremy also serves on the advisory board for Nevada State Bank. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, appreciate having me.
Well, we've divided the survey into 4 sections, and each of the videos is devoted to one of these sections: outlook and concerns, the economy, employment, and legislation. So let's start with outlook and concerns, which gives us the overall picture of what actual business people in Nevada are thinking. So Jeremy, what did the survey say about the top challenges faced by small business owners in Nevada?
Look, I think we always have to be careful about painting all of small businesses in Nevada with a single brush, right? The concern for my business may be different from another business. We talk about concerns for companies as large as hotels and casinos to as small as a mom and pop that are running a restaurant. But when we take a look at the survey results and really what people said, they kind of fell into a few pretty important categories. One was healthcare, another one was taxes, and a third one was regulation. Those were the things that kind of bubbled up to the top. With regard to healthcare, a lot of people are still very concerned about the Affordable Care Act, of course, passed in Washington, D.C. a while back, and now it's really being implemented, and people are starting to realize that some of those costs are pretty significant. And the interesting thing is they're concerned not only from a standpoint that healthcare costs are going up for the business owner themselves, but they're also concerned about the ability to provide healthcare to their employees and whether those employees are going to be required to go out onto an exchange. Because the biggest concern that circulates around healthcare, and it's been the same for a couple of years now, is about the uncertainty associated with healthcare. We just don't know exactly what it's going to cost. We don't understand all of the elements of the Affordable Care Act, and so businesses in Nevada remain very concerned about that. Not surprisingly, taxes is also pretty high up on the list. This is one that business folks are always concerned about, right? When they talk about things like federal taxes and the tax rates and where they are falling out. When they talk about local taxes, of course, the legislature in 2015 made significant reforms to taxes in the state of Nevada. And then even at the local level, you know, the fact that things like business licenses, we've heard a lot about that, particularly as it relates to things like network transportation companies, guys like Uber and Lyft, right? And there's been a lot of news out there relative to how all that's going to play out. Even things like medical marijuana and those type of facilities, a lot in the news relative to how much they were going to have to pay in terms of licensing. But you've seen local governments revisit a lot of that licensing as a result of that, and that's raised a lot of awareness among small businesses. And then there's the third piece, which is really kind of regulation. What is it that I'm required to do? What am I not allowed to do? You know, there's a lot of environmental regulation that's affecting folks, a lot of concern over water use and electricity and those type of things. We've seen a lot in the news recently, of course, about solar and those type of things, and whether or not homeowners are going to be able to deal with some of those. So look, there is no one thing that I think we can point to relative to concerns among small businesses, but I think it's a number of things that fall into these kind of main categories: healthcare and the ability to deliver it, taxes and keeping those taxes low while delivering the necessary services the business needs, and really this big concern of over-regulation, which is, you know, Nevada does a pretty good job of letting a business be a business, and we really need to continue to do that.
Do you think you could go into a little bit more detail regarding the payroll tax? I know that there's a lot of misconceptions, at least I seem to feel it when I'm talking to some of our small business owners, of who it really impacts and what it was really meant to do.
Sure. That's a great question. You know, in the 2015 legislature, the governor brings forward a tax plan to essentially fund what is probably the most far-reaching education reforms in the history of the state of Nevada. And those morphed over time, but really from a business perspective, there's 2 component parts, right? One is the payroll tax. This is called the modified business tax. It's the business tax that the vast majority of businesses pay in the state of Nevada. That portion of the tax was increased from about 1.17% to 1.47%. And those percentages probably don't matter. It's about a 27% increase for most businesses relative to the amount they're going to pay in that payroll tax. The other piece of it is the commerce tax. And this is a new piece for the state of Nevada that essentially says if you're a large business, and by large business I mean with more than $4 million worth of revenue, that you're going to have to pay a tax in addition to that payroll tax, which is based on essentially your gross receipts, how much revenue you bring to the top end. Now, the rates are very, very small, but the tax has a broader base, meaning that it not only affects businesses that are in Nevada, but for the first time ever, businesses that may not be physically located in Nevada, may not have their employees physically located in Nevada, will have to apportion a share of their revenue based on whatever they sell in our state and bring that money in. They're going to have to make some payment relative to that particular tax if they're selling more than $4 million worth of goods and services in the state of Nevada. That is pretty important to us as a state overall. Now, it's more complicated than that. There's some deductions that go on between the payroll component and the commerce tax component. But perhaps what is most important in that is that, this is something that's new. And so we're always concerned about revenue coming in a little under expectations, or even more importantly, revenues coming in way higher than expectations. We don't want to do that. So as part of the plan that was brought forward, in the event that that generates way more revenue than what's expected, then that payroll tax that's paid by all of those Nevada businesses has to be lowered as a result of that. So again, it's pretty simple in its application, but businesses in the state of Nevada have got to get up to speed with that. The Nevada Department of Taxation is currently working through regulations as it relates to that particular tax, and those will be forthcoming. But businesses in Nevada are now required to report relative to how much revenue they generate and how much tax they have. It's going to be a little bit of a change for businesses small and large.
When do you think that tax will actually be able to be effective?
Well, it became effective immediately, as a matter of fact. It's effective today. And oftentimes people are thinking, I don't realize that a tax becomes effective until I'm actually required to pay it, right? But interestingly enough, this is one of those taxes where, you are essentially operating for a full year, and then at the end of the fiscal year, which of course is June 30th for the state of Nevada, you're going to get a tax bill is going to come due, and you're going to have to pay that. Now, again, I want to be clear, the vast majority of businesses in the state of Nevada, we have more than 280,000 of them in the state of Nevada, and the vast majority of them are small businesses. That's why we focus largely on small businesses in our survey, because they are so important to our communities, north, south, and rural. But those businesses are all going to be required to report, even if they're under that $4 million threshold. So there's going to be an administrative hurdle that all businesses are going to have to deal with. Those larger businesses, $4 million and above, are going to actually have to pay taxes based on what they've earned over that past 12-month period.
So what do you think the percentage of revenue that's going to be generated from people in the past who did business in the state of Nevada but never pay taxes?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. The answer is we don't know for sure, but we can look at what other states have done and what their experience has been. We can look at places like Texas that has not the same tax, but a similar tax. We can look at Ohio, which has what's called, they sometimes it's referred as the CAT tax, but it's a similar tax, not the exact same tax. And I can tell you that if we go back and look at some of those states, that their experience is as much as a third of the revenue that they generate is sourced to those specific, let me say that differently, that a third of the revenue that they generate is sourced to businesses that are outside of the state that are actually selling something into the state, which now are required to pay that tax. And that would be great for businesses here in Nevada, because today, if you don't have employees here and you're located in Texas, but you're selling your goods here, you're located in Indiana, and you ship something into the state of Nevada, you have almost no tax liability whatsoever. For the first time ever, those businesses, not unlike almost every other state in the United States, are going to have to pay some of that here. And if you were going to make me guess, I'd guess it's probably going to be somewhere in the 20% range, but it's going to depend on compliance. Almost every other state in the United States has a business income tax. We don't have that in the state of Nevada. And frankly, we don't want one of those in the state of Nevada. We also don't have a personal income tax. We don't want one of those either. But we don't have one of those. But the thing that is similar in almost every one of those taxes is that there is that apportionment into the state. So for the first time ever, Nevada is actually going to benefit from the fact that those out-of-state businesses that are benefiting from our economy here at home are actually going to have to contribute to paying for our roads and making sure that our education system is better and making sure that we have health care in the state of Nevada. Again, no one wants to see taxes go up, but the fact that we're sharing some of that burden, I will certainly argue, is a very good thing.
According to the survey, most small business owners reported that they actually had an uptick in revenues. And a lot of people are asking us, are we really behind recession, especially in Nevada?
Yeah. The answer is, are we past this recession? Is it in our rearview mirror? And look, from an analyst perspective, the answer is absolutely yes. But again, I think we have to be very cautious about painting everyone with the same brush. There are still businesses that are struggling every day to sort of get to the other side. And so often we measure whether or not we're past the recession by whether or not we've gotten back to where we were when the market was at its absolute peak. Well, we're still a ways from there. As a matter of fact, in the state of Nevada, we haven't even added back all of the employees that we've lost during what was referred to as the Great Recession, or sometimes referred to as the crisis, right? We haven't added back all those, where the nation as a whole has added back all of those employees. And there's a reason for that. So much of our economy was in construction when we were at the very highest point. And what we've seen is that we've actually diversified our economy. I will certainly make the argument that the state of Nevada's economy right now is healthier than when we went into the recession. It may not always feel that way, but it should be. But look at where we are today. We are now back to at or near the nation's highest in terms of population growth. We've seen our unemployment rate was at 14%, drop to about 6.5%, depending on where you look at it and how you measure it. You've seen, a number of those underlying fundamentals get back to where we would want to see them. So from a technical perspective, no doubt, we are past the recession and have been for some time. Our state is now growing again, and that's a terrific thing. But in terms of, from an individual business standpoint, the folks that you talk to every day, the folks that are Nevada State Bank's customers, look, I don't think we want to substitute our judgment for theirs. I don't think we want to discount the struggles that those businesses are going through. A lot of businesses had to make very difficult decisions relative to their employees or whether they were going to expand or something along those lines. And that's a struggle still today that we're dealing with in this state and businesses big and small.
Do you see a difference in how small business owners answered the survey versus if they were in the South, the North, or more importantly, out in the East, which is very heavily reliant on the mining industries?
Yeah, look, I want to be careful about drawing too many conclusions in terms of small areas, because you start to get to a point where you're just not surveying enough businesses to be statistically significant. But that doesn't mean that the responses aren't meaningful. If we talk to folks in the North and the South, and I think about that in terms of Clark County, the Clark County MSA, the Las Vegas MSA, and then the Reno Sparks MSA, if we talk to those two folks, there's no doubt that there's increased optimism relative to where they have been and where they are today. There's certainly a feeling that things are better than they were before. There's some concern about where we're headed, and we'll talk about that probably later in another video, but there is some of that concern. Now, if we talk about some of the rural communities, you said some of the east areas, the Elcos and some of those, look, I don't think there's any doubt. When we talk to folks, people aren't blind to the fact that the price of gold has dropped significantly. I think there's a lot of concern about the mining industry overall. The funny thing is, though, those communities have done a pretty darn good job of stabilizing, even though the price of gold has dropped dramatically. The number of mining employees hasn't dropped as fast as the price of gold, and we're still seeing investment in some of those areas, which is important. I think mining industries, mining companies got pretty smart about when the economy was going up, they went after reserves that were much more difficult to get after. They went after things that they may not have been able to sell when the price of gold had dropped or has dropped as much as it has. Now, when we think about those rural areas and we talk to some of the small businesses in those areas, they are very aware of the price of gold. They are very aware of the cyclical nature. They are very aware of the dependency of those areas on mining and mining-related activities. So overall, there is greater concern, I would say, in those mining-dependent economies, those agriculture, those ranching-dependent economies, than we've seen in the years past. At the same time, the economies are not nearly as affected as I think most analysts were concerned that they would be.
Small business owners were very optimistic in Nevada versus where they were regarding the United States. But one of the things that came out of the survey is that a lot of them talked about they weren't going to be adding that many additional jobs in the smaller sector.
Sure. So you sort of point to two important issues here as we go through it. You know, one is this idea that businesses really believe in Nevada, and I think that is pretty important. You know, I mean, so many businesses relocated here, so many of us relocated here from somewhere else, right? This is the community, or this is the state, I guess I should say, that businesses and people who live here have chosen, right? And so when they're looking at that and they compare how they feel about the state of Nevada versus how they feel about the United States economy, they're much more bullish on the Nevada economy. They really feel that the Nevada economy is headed more so in the right direction than they feel the United States economy is headed in the right direction. And that absolutely came through in the survey. That was overwhelming. We've seen that before. We've seen it even more now. Look, our governor has been remarkably strong and is very popular. A lot of people are behind him. I think that when we talk about things like education reform, that's things people can get behind, including business folks want to see that. You know, one of the other concerns that was mentioned in the survey was the idea of the scarcity of quality employees, right? And we heard that from a number of folks in a number of different sectors, that they're struggling with that. Well, that comes from education, and I think when businesses see the fact that we're making strides toward education reform, that we're talking about where our weaknesses are, that we're continuing to see large-scale economic development, that those type of things are resonating with those business folks. Now, the second half of your question was, well, hey, all of that is great and good, but if people aren't going to be employing many people, if they're not going to be hiring as much, is that something we need to be concerned about? The answer is absolutely yes. What we do know today is that when we ask folks about what their future expectations are, that they're saying, wait a second, we're seeing some clouds on the horizon. And remarkably, you know, when we did this survey, it was a couple of months back, it's almost like the small businesses forecast. They almost predicted some of this instability we were going to see at the beginning of the year, right? You know, I like to say, you know, 3 economists can agree if 2 of them are dead, right? But if you want to ask something about somebody, you ask small businesses, you ask consumers about what they're seeing, and are they going to be investing, and are they going to be hiring people? They're usually pretty honest with you, and in this case, they were. So I think, you know, we need to listen to what those businesses said. They're saying, hey, look, we feel good about what 2015 did. It was good for us, but we're seeing the fact that we may not be able to keep that pace going into 2016, and we're even more concerned about the United States as a whole keeping that pace going into 2016. Again, pretty insightful from the businesses that we interviewed.
Jeremy, one of the things I've noticed as recently as from September is that a lot of small business owners are not as optimistic as they once were. And they talk a lot about the instability that they're seeing in the stock market and some of the major markets like China and Japan. And they're actually pulling back from wanting to do some of the expansion they had really originally talked about.
Yeah, look, I mean, we see it happening all over the place. And I hope the viewers take the time to sit down when you and I talk about the economy, because this is probably not a 30-second response. But at the end of the day, the answer is, of course, businesses are concerned about China. Businesses are concerned about the drop in the price of oil. Businesses are concerned when the stock market drops. That affects a business owner no different than it affects someone else that's taking a look at those news articles and thinking about, hey, there's instability around the globe. How is that going to affect me?
On behalf of Nevada State Bank, I'd like to thank Jeremy for presenting this valuable information. To download a free copy of the 2016 Small Business Survey, go to nevadasmallbusiness.com/survey. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.